Objects with different densities behave differently in water. Some float, while others sink. The phenomenon of floating and sinking is governed by the principles of buoyancy and density. Density, defined as mass per unit volume, determines whether an object will float or sink in a fluid. An object floats if its density is less than the density of the fluid it is placed in. Conversely, an object sinks if its density is greater than the density of the fluid. Buoyancy is the upward force exerted by a fluid that opposes the weight of an immersed object. Density is defined as how tightly packed the material is within an object. Objects with higher density have more mass packed into the same volume. A rubber duck exhibits lower density due to its loosely packed internal structure. A stone demonstrates higher density because its particles are tightly packed together. Equal volumes of different materials can have different densities. Density differences explain why some objects float while others sink in water. Density determines whether an object floats or sinks in water. A rubber duck floats because it is less dense than water. A stone sinks because it is denser than water. Density is a measure of mass per unit volume. Buoyancy is the upward force exerted by a fluid that opposes the weight of an immersed object. An object floats when the buoyant force equals or exceeds the object's weight. Boats are designed to displace a large volume of water. The weight of the displaced water is equal to the buoyant force acting on the boat. A boat's shape allows it to displace more water than a solid object of the same weight. A boat displaces water when placed in it, causing the water level to rise. The weight of the water displaced by the boat is equal to the buoyant force acting on the boat. Buoyant force is the upward force exerted by a fluid that opposes the weight of an immersed object. When the buoyant force equals the boat's weight, the boat floats. This principle explains why objects like boats, despite being heavy, can float on water. Archimedes' principle states that the buoyant force on an object submerged in a fluid is equal to the weight of the fluid displaced by the object. The buoyant force directly opposes the weight of the object, determining whether the object floats or sinks. An object floats when the buoyant force is equal to or greater than the object's weight. Even though steel is denser than water, a steel ship can float because of its shape and the volume of water it displaces. The principle explains why large, heavy objects like ships can float, provided they displace enough water to generate sufficient buoyant force.